Boker Tov, Chodesh Tov. Chodesh Tov. Today's daf is daf Tzadik in Nidrim. We left off yesterday on the 11th line, Lema Messiah Le. What was the discussion? If a person makes a neder, but it's not chal yet, he made it dependent on something else, and it's not chal yet, can you break it? Rav Nosson said you cannot break it. Nachum said you could. We're talking about a regular case where a husband or a father breaks the neder. Let's talk about the case of the husband breaks his wife's neder. Let's say she makes an neder that didn't start yet. It's dependent on some other condition being fulfilled. Can he break it yet? Rav Nosson said you cannot. The Chacham say you may. And of course, we're going to go like the Chachamim and a machlokes between Rav Nosson and the Chachamim. However, we brought down a case where Rav Acha was concerned for Rav Nosson's opinion, and he made sure that the neder was chal. In other words, a man had made a neder that he's not going to, he forbids himself all harm of the world if he gets married before he becomes a Talmid Chacham. He tried to become a Talmid Chacham and he could not. He wasn't successful in that. So basically, he couldn't get married. If he would get married, the condition of getting married would trigger his being usher on everything in the world would be usher to him. So rather than be maternetta at that point before the neder was chal, because he didn't get married yet. Because if he gets married without being a Talmid Chacham, then that'll trigger the beginning of the neder. But why do you have to trigger it all? Just be mater it now. Rav Acha triggered him. He tricked him into getting married, so that would trigger the neder being chal. So the Gemara wanted to show from this, that Rav Nosson, obviously Rav Acha was concerned with Rav Nosson's opinion. So this would indicate that not only is there machlokus about a husband breaking his wife's neder, here we're talking about a man who made a neder. And he said, everything in the world will be usher to me. I can't have enough of anything in the world if I get married before I become a Talmid Chacham. So here we're talking about hataras nadarim, not a husband and a wife, but rather a man. And he felt apparently that just like there's machlokas from Nosson and the Chachamim about hafaras nadarim, there's also machlokas about hataras nadarim. So he said we have to be concerned about Nosson's opinion, and maybe you can't break it unless the neder is actually chal. Rav Papi said in the Gemara at the top of the page on Tzaddik, Rav Papi said no, achlokas by afara. There Rav Nosson says ein abal meifel kain chal an eder. There it's machlokas there. According to Chacham and Chacham, they disagree whether you can break an eder before it's actually chal. Aval b'sheila divrei ein chacham matur klamel kain chal an eder. Rav Papi says no. Everybody agrees when it comes to hataras nadarim. She'ela, which is being shown from Talmid Chacham, you can't be mater unless it's actually chal. So therefore, and he's giving you the halacha. So he's saying that Rav Acha wasn't simply trying to hold like Rav Nosson, but he was saying in general, everybody holds. When it comes to hataras nadarim, you can't be mater unless the neder is actually chal. Lema Messiah, this is where we left off yesterday in the 11th line. Let's bring a proof to Rav Papi said. Why? Man says, Kodem Sheni and Ploni. I'm not going to have enough. Usually it could be from Ploni. From the Ranatz Mashba is giving anah to Ploni, Rav Menachasai, lip Ploni here, even though the other Rishonim seem to say that it's from Ploni. It doesn't make any difference. The neder was made that he forbade, let's say, Yankov to have anah from him. Ulamisha Esholav. And also, when I matter that neder, I want that person also not to be able to have enough from me. Whoever's matter neder from me, from the rabbi, whoever's matter neder, Ulamisha Esholav, I'll also have him forbidden, have my assets forbidden on him. So, in other words, he made two nadarim. One neder, Yaakov can't have enough for me. And if I matter that neder, the one who's matter neder from him, I want him also to be usher me. Like I'm giving it a double barrel. Number one, Yaakov can't have enough for me. And if I'm shoel on that neder, whoever's matter neder for me, that rabbi, I don't want him to have enough for me. Nishal Rishon, if he got a Torah on the first neder, then the second one. If you could say you could be shoel on a neder, you can get a taras nadarim even though the neder wasn't chal yet. Why do you say you have to ask you have to be shoel first on the first neder, then on the second one? What do you mean? Even though the second one wasn't chal yet. When was the second one be chal? If the rabbi would be mater neder, then it would be chal on him too. But who says why do you have to wait for the rabbi to be mater neder of the first one? Meaning so that the neder on him would be chal. You could be if you say that you can be shoel on neder even though it's not chal, why don't you say that you could be shoel on the rabbi first and then on the first guy and then on Yankov? So the Gemara, how do you know that's not what it means? Ihai Basra. How do you know which one's first and second? In other words, he says over here, I'm making a neder, Yankel can't have any enough for me. And if I'm mater neder, if some rabbi is mater neder on Yankel, I want a neder to be chal on the rabbi. Then it says you should be showing the first one, and then you can be showing the second one. How do you know which is the first, second one? Maybe when he says the first one means the first one that you show on, which is the one with the rabbi. The second one, that's not clear from there, so it's not a proof from there that you can't be mater neder unless they're actually chal. Let's bring a proof from this case. Here, look at this case. I don't want Yankel to have any enough for me. Hareini nazir l'kshe'eshalab. And when I matter that neder, I want to be a nazir. If I matter that neder, I'm becoming a nazir. If I become I don't want Yankel to have enough for me. And I'm so strong in that neder that if I'm shoel on that neder, if I try to repeal the neder, have the rabbi annul it, then I become a nazir. Nishal al nidra, v'achach nishal al nizra. Here he says clearly, you have to be shoel first on the neder, then on the naziris. Right? And if you say you could be shoel on a neder, even though it wasn't chal yet, why do you say you have to be shoel first on his neder, then on the naziris? Meaning, when he's shoel on his neder, then that triggers the naziris to be chal. Why? Even if the naziris isn't chal yet, you could also be shoel on it too, if that would be the case. Why do you say you first have to be shoel on neder, then on the naziris? You should be able to shoel on the naziris also, even though it's not chal yet. Elamai, you see that what? You see that you cannot be shoel on a neder until it's chal. So Gemara who says, Rav Nasi, very simple. We had a machlokas between Rav Nasi and the Chacham. Can a husband be mefer? Can he break a neder of his wife even though it's not chal yet? Rav Nasi says you cannot. The Rabbanan say you could. Okay, so what did Rav Papi say? The machlokas is by afara. Rav Nasi says ein a bal mefer elam kein chal neder, and Rabbanan say the husband can break it even though. But by Hashel, everybody agrees. So you want to prove over here? You want to prove over here a proof for a papa? No, maybe of your papi rather. No, maybe your papi is not right. Maybe that not everybody agrees that by she'ela the neder must be chal in order for it to be shoel. Could be that the same machlokas applies as the same machlokas that applies by hafara between Rav Nassan and the Chum. Can you break a neder without it being chal yet? Can a husband break it? The same thing applies by she'ela. And maybe this case goes like Rav Nassan, who says you can't be shoel on a neder, just like he says you can't break a neder until it's chal. The same thing goes by shoel. So this is not a proof to Rav Papi. Maybe this goes like Rav Nassan, just like he goes by afar, the same thing goes by she'ela. So it's no proof in there. Ravina said as follows: Amali Merema told me, this is what your father. Now Ravina's father said Bishmeid Rav Papi, the other way around. Machlokas by afar, the machlokas between Rav Nassan and Chum is by afar, whether you can break it before it's chal. And al b'she'ela, Divrei called mefer. Everybody says you could break it. You can break it even though that is chal. Yosef lo yachal dvaro. Yesterday, before the lines get wide and the narrowest lines on this page, what did we say? That he darshans lo yachal dvaro lo yaker chalos dvaro. That yachel means like to be chal. The neder should take effect, and you can't uproot the neder's taking effect, right? Unless it's actually chal. Okay, you can't be oker a neder unless it's chal. Now he's translating it the simple way. The first, as in the first of the widest lines on the Ran, on this page, the widest lines in the Ran. What does he say? As long as it's just words, right? The name of the Devaro, Dvar Ba'alma Mashma, below Chalos and Neder. Meaning, so Rav Papi saying now, that Divrei Kol you could break it. What does it mean, Mefer? Again, Lashon of Afara, I told you many times, it's interchange. It really means Hatara, right? Because by Sheila, there's no Afara. By Sheila, there's Hatara. Even though the neder is not chal, the same yachal devaro, right? You can't break your own words, but somebody else can break your words. All you need is words. Remember, even though it's not even chal yet, the neder hasn't taken effect. It's just words. You can still break it. So we have two different opinions in Rav Papi. Rav Papi says the machlokas between Rav Nassan and the Chachamim, where the husband can break a neder if it's not chal, that's by afara. But by she'ela, the first opinion we said was the what? That he says, what did he say? Rav Papi said at the top of the page, Ein abal neder. But by atara, everybody agrees, Ein chacham mater klum elen kein chal neder siv le'achal dvaro. That was the first way of Rav Papi. The second way of Rav Papi is the opposite. You can't. The siv le'achal dvaro, turning the page, l'meimra, the Gemara, Even though there's no mice, he could also break it. So this is what we're saying now. Now, we're saying the opposite. So yesterday we said at the top of this page where a puppy says, by Shayla, everybody agrees you cannot break it unless it's chal, right? And we tried to bring a proof, and we said it's not a real proof that because it's mashma, it has to be chal first. That could be Rav Nosson Shita. Maybe he holds the same thing as by a far, he holds the same thing by a Torah. Now we're saying the other way around. So the two proofs that we started off today by bringing a proof to the first opinion in Rav Papi that you cannot break not be matzah unless it's chal, and we try to bring a proof. Now we're saying Rav Papi holds the opposite, that by a hatar sadam you can break it even though it's not chal. So the proofs that we brought to the first version of Rav Papi will now be questions on the second version. Meisvei at the top of the page. Before we're going to turn back to Amud Aleph in a minute to see the Ran, but first let's finish the Gemara. What did Rav Papi just say in the second version? That by a tar sadarim, everybody agrees you could break it even though it's not chal. Meisvei. Remember, I'm not going to give hana to Yankel. Ulamisha nisholav. And if I show a netter on that netter, I'm not going to have a nod to give out to that rabbi also. Nishol rishon b'achach nishol sheni. First one, then the second one. Why do you have to ask the first one first? If you say that you could be matzah neder or hatar sadarim, you could be matzah neder even if it's not chal yet, why do you have to be showing the first one, then on the second one? You could be showing the second one regarding the rabbi who's matzah neder, even though it's not chal yet. The answer is again, Mia, the Hebrisha, and the Haitian. How do you know which is the first and second? It just means of the two, you do one and then the other one. It doesn't mean the very first one that you said and then the second one. It just means whichever one you're showing, you could be all on one and then on the second one. But the second one, the second proof that we said, which we said is a good proof to the first version, but then we said maybe that's Rav Nosson, this will be a kasha. Because what are you saying now, Rav Papi? That everybody agrees by a tar satarim you could be matzah neder even though it's not chal. Meisvei, kodem sheini henning, not going to have an to Yankel. Vareni nozlik sheshalav. And if I'm shol on that neder to Yankel, I'm becoming a nazir. Nishal nidra b'achkat nishal nizra. He says we show on the neder, then on the naziris. Why do you say you have to be shown first on the neder of Yankel, then on the naziris? You should be able to show on the naziris too, even though the naziris is not chal yet. According to the second version of Papi says you can be shown even though it's not chal. The answer is that's taka kasha. Therefore, what's the psak halacha? Let's take a look at the Ran on Amud Aleph. Turn back to Amud Aleph, Sadak Amud Aleph. The first of the widest lines, the end of the first of the widest lines. We are like Rabbanan the Kligal Rav Nosson Vami the Baal Mefer. When it comes to the husband that we had on yesterday's daf, doesn't break his netter, he can break a netter even though it's not chal yet. We go like the rabbis. Vote, and Rabbi Kiva said that before. Remember, we had a couple of days ago. What do we say? That the Amar, Ashes Ish, for woman said, Hareini Nozil Shkash, I'm going to be a Nazira when I get divorced. And then she was divorced. The husband could break it while they were still married. He could break it even though it wasn't chal yet. So we hold, like when it comes to breaking an eder, a husband can break an eder even though it's not chal yet. He says, I'm going to do something, it wasn't chal yet, he could still break the eder. That's how we paskin. However, miu, 3 lines from the bottom of the page in the Ran, miu, hani milu b'shel b'shetolsa neder b'davar she'asoi la'avar al tanah. That's when she made an eder, even though it wasn't chal yet, but she conditioned it on something that, that she might be over on the Tanah. If I help your father, I won't help you. If I help you, I won't help your father. But let's say she made a condition on something which she's not necessarily going to be over on. For example, she says, if I don't wash, this and this will happen. So don't wash, like the Gemara said before, so don't wash and don't be usher. So in a case like that, it's possible, right? This is only this that we say that he could break it even though it's not chal yet, is if, why wasn't it chal yet? It was conditioned on something that's going to take place. And the odds are she will be over on that item. Then you could break it even now. But if it's something that she can get away without doing, for example, let's say she says, everything should be usher to me if I eat peas. So don't eat peas. It doesn't have to be over on the peas. Maybe in a case like that, he can't break it. However, Ulinyan Shela, now turn to the Ran on Amid Beis, and Sadak Amid Beis, the top of the page in the Ran on the right side. Ulinyan Shela, the top line, Ulinyan Shela, kind of like a puppy. In Rabbi Shela, we hold like a puppy. The Omar Machlokas Ba'afar, the Machlokas between Rav Nosson and the Chacham is by a husband breaking his wife's neder. Aval b'she'ela devriyakol ein chachamater oin ken chala neder. When it comes to she'ela, everybody agrees that the Chacham cannot break it unless it's actually chal, and he learns lo yachol dvaro. You can't prevent your netter once it's chal, so to speak. You can't uproot its being chal, but it had to be chal first. He brings down that that's how the netters you can't break a netter unless it's actually chal first. However, the Ran goes on to say, the fourth line there from top page. Let's say he says, this thing is usher to me after 30 days, and chal neder, it's considered as if it's chal. Why? Even though we just said that according to Rav Papi, when it comes to a husband breaking his wife's head, he can break it even though it wasn't chal yet. When it comes to Talmud Chacham breaking an head, he can only break it if it's chal. However, if it's something that's inevitable going to happen because he doesn't have to do anything, it's just a matter of time passing, this will be chal after 30 days. I want to be a nazir after 30 days. Well, 30 days will happen. You can't stop the clock. So that's going to happen. That's called already chal neder. V'chachamata. The loplik Rav Nassim Rana elabetol da'ar she'im efshar she'be'im she'efshar shelo yachal neder lo'olam. Aval told neder b'yom if it depends on days. Kivin she'sof yisur lachol af b'shlochal adayin chachamater. Some say that. Digamandam dafil b'kaikach the kivin she'bikomak madayin and neser and chacham esvar kama teritz alifei. So the Ran says that there's a machlokas. Again, when it comes to Afaris Nadarim, the husband can break a netter even though it's not chal yet. It can pass like the chum. When it comes to Atar Nadarim, he cannot break it unless it's chal. However, he says there's two different opinions about if it's inevitable that it's going to be chal. It's not dependent on me doing something or not doing something. It's dependent on time only. Time will happen. Is it considered as if it happened already, and the Chacham can be matcha that netter even though the 30 days hasn't happened yet? That's a machlokas, and the Ran prefers the first opinion. Now we learned the last mission. We're in the mission of the last mission in the Perek and in the Masechet, which we mentioned before. We had it before. The original opinion was Shalosh Nashim Yotzes V'Notzes. 3 women who, based on their claim, based on something they say, can leave a wedding. In other words, can get divorced or entitled to a divorce, and they're entitled to their ksiba. What are they? Number 1, Homeres Tamanilach. She says to her husband, who's a Kohen, says, I was raped. I was raped. A husband, if a Kohen's wife is raped, there's nothing, you can't stay married to her. So if she says, I was raped, she's entitled to her ksiba. It wasn't her fault. She was raped, right? She was raped. So she's entitled to her ksiba, and he has to give her a divorce. A second case, Shemaim Beinu Ben Echad. She says, listen, you and I know that you can't perform in the bedroom, right? God knows, there's no evidence to this. You can't prove this in court. God knows that you can't perform. Shemaim Beinu Ben Echad. In a case like that also, there's nothing you can do about it. She's entitled to her get. She's entitled to a get and a ksiba. Let's say she says she can't bear to have bia with anybody. She forbids all Jews from having bia with her, which would include her husband. He's also a Jew, right? We had before if he's considered one of the brios, but including him. She says, she just can't, it's too painful for her. She can't bear it. So in all 3 cases, we said she's entitled to a get and a ksiba. Chazuloma, then they changed their mind. Why? Because nitzkat no adoros. And they saw that women were a little bit promiscuous, and some women said, she had her eyes on Yankel in another city somewhere, so she made up some excuse to get out of the marriage. So they said, you know what? And I said, now, she shouldn't look for somebody else and say, listen, I'll get divorced from this guy. I'll say I can't have bia, that he's no good. This happened to me. I was raped, something like that, to get out of the marriage, just to get out of the marriage. Then she'll go and shack up with somebody in another town, where they won't know about her, but she just used the excuse. Therefore, they said, and ruin her husband's wedding, the marriage. So she says, I've been raped. Tavi Ryan, she's got to bring proof that she was raped. A woman just comes and says, I was raped. Maybe a woman wants out of the marriage, so she's not believed. We'll talk about this in more detail. Tavi Ryan, she's got to bring proof to what she says. When she says, you and I know that you can't perform in bed. Yasu derech makasha. What does it mean can't perform in bed? That he doesn't ejaculate with force, which is the only way that she can have children. Even though she's not commanded to have children, but a woman, even though she doesn't have a mitzvah to have children, she's not included in mitzvah pruavu, but she says, I want children. It's a natural tendency. Rabbi Wein talks about that. How can the Torah give a mitzvah to a man to have children, but he needs a woman to have children, and the women aren't commanded to it? The answer is Hashem put in the women a motherly instinct that they want to be a mother. That's number 1. And also she could say, listen, I want somebody to take care of me. Then in my old age, who's going to take care of me? I want, like you say, a stick, somebody to carry me, to help me in my old age. They didn't have Filipinos in those days, right? Hashemayim beinu bencha. So if she said that, Yasu debrach kasha, try to work it out. speak to him nicely, make him a nice meal, try to work it out. In other words, when she says, like, if it's really true that he can't perform in the bedroom, so say it in a nice way, try to work it out, because we can't automatically just demand a divorce and ksuba. When she says, I can't be with anybody, it's too painful for me, that's beino lebeino. We had this before, right? It's not inu, it's beino lebeino. He can break his share. Remember, he can break only the part that's beino lebeino. He says, listen, as far as you and I are concerned, I'm breaking the netter. So she cannot be with him. He can't break the share for everybody else. At this point in time, she can't be with anybody else anyway because she's married to this guy, right? So she can't be with anyway. So it's not beino lebeino, it's not nefesh. So he can break his share, but she is forbidden for somebody else. So if they would get divorced or he dies, she'd have to be hatar sadarim. She'd have to go to the rabbi because that is chal on that. So these are the things that we said in the Mishnah. And we're going to talk more in detail about it. So let's say she says to her husband, now, of course, if a regular woman married to a non-Kohen was raped, doesn't forbid her and her husband, right? Even if she was raped by a goy or by a mamzer or whatever, doesn't forbid her husband. But if she was raped and she was married to a Kohen, that's a problem. So let's say she says, can she still eat truma? She says that she was raped. And question now is, because she truma. So we say, okay, at first we said we believe her and you give her a get. Then we said, no, maybe she just has her eyes on somebody else. So we say that she has to bring proof. Okay, but could she eat truma now? According to her own words, it's like Shav Nafshachit. So she says, I'm not fit to eat truma because I was raped and I'm married to a Kohen. Rav Sheshet she could eat. If you don't allow her to eat truma, people will say, oh, wait a minute. This woman, something's wrong with her, right? Something's wrong with her. And people will say that her children, something's wrong with her. Maybe she's not fit to marry a Kohen. And people will say her children are unfit to be Kohanim, right? Maybe she was a halala or something of that sort. And people will say bad things about her, for she should eat. Rav Amar Enochel, she shouldn't eat. She could eat chulin. She could say, I don't like it. I don't like the truma. I prefer to eat chulin. The fact that she eats chulin and not truma does not prove that something's wrong with her. Amarava, Umar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says that she could eat truma, so you shouldn't be motzi las. She misarmula. Let's say now she's widowed. She first claimed that she was raped. Now she's widowed. Normally, a widow of a Kohen, if she has children from a Kohen, can eat truma, right? If a widow of a Kohen can eat truma because of her kids. Still, she ain't no chelis, right? Because midu time. But what's the reason why he says that shouldn't say bad things about her children? That make nisam skarsha amri hashta is nicer. Now that she was widowed or divorced, right? If she had, even though she had Kohanim children from her, she shouldn't be able to eat truma now because what? What are you going to say? People will say, why can't she eat truma because something was wrong? People will say that she was raped now by a sin or a mamzer or somebody that would ruin her from eating from being marrying to a Kohen and eating truma. In other words, there's nobody's going to be motzi las on her children now, because now that she's widowed or divorced and she doesn't need truma, people say maybe she was raped now by somebody that would make her unfit to marry a Kohen. But her children are here already. There's no problem with her here, right? If a woman had children already, and then people say, look what she did now, something's wrong now, but that's now her children are there already, so it's not an issue. So we have machlokas here between Rav Sheshes and Rava, whether a woman who claimed that she was raped, she was married to a Kohen, could she eat truma or not, right? Technically, we're saying we don't believe her in terms of having to leave the marriage. We don't believe her. Just like that's the taka the halach, I believe today, that if a woman says she's raped, you don't necessarily believe, you don't believe her. Now, what's the idea behind this? So take a look at the Ran, the Ran in the widest lines, 6 lines down in the widest lines. Okay, the economic mastisim, even the beginning of the Amr Tamani, Mitzra Abala, woman says she was raped. And we're talking about here Ashes Cohen, of course, right? Because in Ashes Israel, she was raped, it's not a problem. And in Ashes Cohen could say, what's her argument if she was raped? She says, listen, I was raped, it was not my fault, I should be entitled to the ksuba, right? Because if I was married to a Israel, nothing would be wrong. But over here, when she says that, since we say, when she says I was raped, the Medina, the Amar Tmeni L'cha, Mitzvah Bala, she should commit Rishon. In other words, the first Mishnah said, she says she was raped. She can't stay married to a Kohen. She should be able to get a ksuba. Except the rabbi said, we're afraid maybe she gave her eye, maybe she's looking on somebody else. Maybe she's, has her eyes to marry somebody else. So she used that excuse, right? So the question is, but if she's really believed, how do you mount her to get married? How do you say over here? What are we saying? If an Ashes Cohen was raped, if we know that she was raped, what's the halacha? He has to divorce her, right? He can't stay married to her. And we're saying if she's really believed, except we're afraid maybe she has her eyes on somebody else. Because of that, you're going to be matter to stay with the Cohen. Cohen can't stay married to a woman who was raped. Even though basically it's also the rabbis are matter and they're mevatel milsa daraisa. Okay, because they can make their own stringencies and gedarim and takonos and things like that sort. They can make a geder. They can make a rule, like a fence around the rule to keep it that way. But the Ryan goes on to say, yeah, but that's only by sheval taseh. For example, the rabbi said, don't take the lulav on the first day of Sukkot if it comes on a Shabbos because we're afraid maybe you'll carry it or the shofar or whatever, right? The rabbis can say b'sheval taseh, they're mavatal halacha the Torah. But here it's kumasei. Here we're saying technically the husband, that she has to leave the marriage. A Kohen can't stay married to her. And because we're afraid now maybe she has her eyes on somebody else, they say stay married to her. How do they allow that? So the Ran says it's not a kasha to me. D, about 10 lines from the bottom page, the Ran says, just we say is called the Makadash Adaita Rabban Kaddish. When you get married, right? It's always Kaddish Rabban, they're abundant in older marriage. When she says, I've been raped, the Rabbanan said you were never married. You were never married. Right? And the Rabbanan say, how do they allow her to stay married to the Kohen? If we believe, why shouldn't you believe? She says she was raped. You're afraid that maybe she has her eyes on somebody else, right? But basically she should be believed, like we said at the beginning. She says, I'm raped, he has to divorce her. How do they allow her to stay married to her? You say, no, we don't believe unless she has proof that she was raped. Go bring proof that she was raped. Not so simple. In most cases, very hard to prove that somebody was raped. So how do they allow her? Man, the answer is the Rabbanan said in that case, we took away the proof she was never married to the Kohen originally. So when she was raped, she was a pnuya. She wasn't married. That's what he says. And so when she was raped, pnuya haisa. You have to say the chiyam in there. That only works if she was raped by a person who was a regular kosher Jew, right? If she was raped by somebody who would make her forbidden to marry a Kohen, for example, what's a woman? A Kohen cannot marry a grusha, right? He also cannot marry a zona. What is a zona lahalacha? A zona lahalacha is a woman who slept with somebody who would who's forbidden for her to marry. For example, like a mamzer or a nasin or a goy. So in a case like that, so how that wouldn't help. To say that she wasn't married at the time of the rape would help her only if she was married, if she was raped by a regular kosher Jew. But if she was raped by somebody who like a nasin or a mamzer or a goy, that wouldn't help. It's not mashma that way. The Gemara says Mishnah says stam. The rabbis change your mind and say, unless you have proof, you can stay married to the Kohen. The first verse is not really a din. The truth is, the other pshat is no. Not that a woman should be believed, that a woman's not believed, period. Why a woman comes along and says, it's not basically a halacha, she should be believed. But the rabbi said, we're afraid she has eyes and something else. She's not believed at all. If we say it's embarrassing to say that, the rabbi said that, okay, we'll believe her because it's probably, if it wouldn't be true that she was raped, she probably wouldn't want to advertise it, right? Because she's embarrassed. Therefore, the rabbi said that she wouldn't be mezalzel herself, she wouldn't shame herself unless it was true. But once the rabbi said no, that she would shame herself in order to have her eyes on somebody else, they allowed. But basically, the Ran comes out that a woman who just says that I was raped, don't necessarily believe her. There's no reason to believe her. Only reason to believe her is because why would she say that unless it was really true? But there's no din halacha that she's believed, but over here, she's meshubah to her husband. Why would you believe her? In Taka, I think that's the halacha that, in unfortunate cases, unless they know for sure, you don't assume that she was raped, even though she says that. Anyway, this is where we're up to now. And we said this Shaila here in the Gemara about Truma. We should be able to eat Truma. Not that's a machlokus between Rava and Rav Sheshes. Now Rav Papa says a new Allah. We're fine in the Gemara 5 months from the bottom page. Amar Rav Papa Barak Lan Rava. He's going to ask this question: if a woman says that she Eishes Kom Shenensa, he asks this question: if a Eishes Kom was raped, she was raped. We know she was raped. Is she entitled to the ksuba or not? And that question we'll deal with tomorrow, Mirz Hashem, as we'll pick it up from here tomorrow. 5 months from the bottom of Sadik and Beis. Mirz Hashem will finish the Masechet, make a siyum, and begin Nazir tomorrow. Mirz Hashem. Chodesh Tov l'kulam.